Composite Energy, energizing Gambia.
Welcome back. The U.S. city of Boston is healing after the dramatic events of the last 7 days as investigators learn more about how and why the attack on the Boston Marathon unfolded. The lone surviving suspect of the attacks is in hospital. 19-year Zoka Tsarnaev was captured Friday night after a massive manhunt. Tsarnaev has a gunshot wound to his neck and is unable to speak. It is unclear if he was hit during his capture or in an earlier shooting with police. That gun battle left his older brother dead. Acquaintances say the 26-year Tamerlan Tsarnaev may have been the leader. Investigators believe that he became further radicalized on a 6-month trip to Russia last year. And now some U.S. lawmakers accuse the FBI of dropping the ball. CNN's Emily Smith reports from Washington.
Did the FBI do enough to learn about one brother, and now who questions the younger brother?
This man, in my view, should be designated as a potential enemy combatant, and we should be allowed to question him for intelligence gathering purposes to find out about future attacks and terrorist organizations that may exist that he has knowledge of.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the enemy combatant designation would allow investigators to question Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, a U.S. citizen, without a lawyer, acknowledging that none of that information could be used against him in a criminal court. Democrat Dianne Feinstein argues questioning can happen for a limited time before Miranda rights are read, without calling Tsarnaev an enemy combatant, under what's called the public safety exception. It lets investigators question a suspect about any imminent threat.
I'm not really worried about whether they can be convicted. The question is, what else would they have been up to? Who are their associates? How did he become radicalized? Is there a Chechnya connection? And that's what has to be discovered.
There's also debate about Tamerlan Tsarnaev, shot dead during the manhunt. The FBI interviewed him in 2011 at the request of Russia, then dropped the matter after asking for more specific information from Russia. The FBI says it never received.
Why is this FBI interview important? Because if he was on the radar and they let him go, he's on the Russians' radar, and why wasn't a flag put on him, some sort of customs flag?
House Homeland Security Chairman Michael McCaul says he and fellow Republican Peter King want answers from the FBI. Democrats have questions, too.
Why wasn't he interviewed when he came back, either at the airport when he was returning or later? And what happened in Chechnya?
Massachusetts doesn't have the death penalty, but the federal government does. Senators Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein, both Democrats, said Sunday they think the death penalty would be appropriate under federal law in this case. Emily Schmidt, CNN, Washington.
A desperate search for survivors is underway in southwest China, where a powerful earthquake struck Sichuan province on Saturday. Efforts have been hampered by continuous aftershocks, and according to state media, at least 188 people have been killed and more than 11,000 injured. Meantime, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang traveled to the disaster zone Saturday. He visited a local hospital to comfort the injured. That region of China is prone to earthquakes, and whilst the damage this time around is not as severe, getting aid to survivors once again proving to be a major challenge. CNN's David McKenzie has more.
Of this earthquake, it's still dangerous. A soldier badly injured by debris. Waves more move into this remote corner of Sichuan province to help, where the quake flattened homes and hopes.
This two-story house was completely destroyed. This quake happened early in the morning. People were going to work or to their fields, caught completely unawares. Now, houses like this two-story structure, you see these cracks down the side, so people are too afraid to sleep in them, so they're staying outside. Some people left so quickly that they left their animals tied up outside.
I was cooking breakfast, says Xiao Qiang. My son Gao Yun was playing over there when it struck. All of a sudden, the house started swaying back and forth, she says, swaying back and forth. All she could do is grab her son and run. But her uncle was crushed to death next door. We need everything. We haven't had a proper meal or drank good water since the quake, says 49-year-old Lu Hongying. She was leaving the house when it started to shake. I was just so frightened, she says. I couldn't think straight. I just wanted to save my family inside. But her father-in-law didn't make it.
This moment, the people, they need water. They need a very quick food, because even for some noodle, it's still lack of. And I think they need a tank, the people can live in. So you can see people here. I think we need to very quickly make action.
Action is needed for the thousands of injured treated in makeshift clinics, and for the homeless. Just finding a place to eat and to sleep is the new reality. David Mackenzie, CNN, Sichuan, China.
Forward. Japanese fishermen are still feeling the fallout from the Fukushima nuclear disaster. They say that they are unable to sell fish at the market due to the radiation levels. CNN's Diana Magne has more.
It's a huge catch for a tiny boat. All manner of fish flap about on the deck, but it's too choppy for us to film. By the time we're back at the port, there's little movement.
Today's catch would have been worth $3,000 US, they think, far more than they would have caught before Fukushima, because these waters are now so underfished. But all they can do with them is sort out the biggest varieties and send them off to the lab for testing. They can sell none of this.
Sea bream, flounder, sea bass, a gigantic monkfish. Like throwing away money, the fishermen say. We can't put them on the market. There's nothing we can do, says Mitsunori Suzuki. Wrecked boats litter Iwaki Harbor still 2 years after the tsunami, a wasteland where buildings once stood. But it was the nuclear disaster at Fukushima Daiichi power plant 30 kilometers further north which destroyed these men's livelihoods. Contaminated water used to cool highly radioactive nuclear fuel released straight into the ocean by TEPCO, the plant operator, in the weeks after the earthquake and tsunami. 2 years on, the fishermen are frustrated to hear of further leaks. TEPCO says they'll dig a hole right in front of the reactor building and throw that groundwater into the ocean before it gets contaminated, Suzuki says. But what's happened now is there's a leak in a reservoir above, so that groundwater won't be clean. One of TEPCO's many problems is that groundwater is leaking into the damaged reactor buildings. 400 cubic meters a day, on top of the 300 cubic meters it has to pump through to cool the nuclear fuel debris sunk deep inside the reactor vessels. That water gets contaminated too, and all of it needs to be stored somewhere. Leaks in the underground reservoir system mean TEPCO's having to resort to overground tanks, 900 of them, 80% of which are full. Last week, inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency examined the site to check on the decommissioning process and to see for themselves whether TEPCO's measures to deal with its water issues were effective, namely a better purification technology still in testing, which TEPCO says would make the contaminated water safe enough to release, and a pumping system to try and lower the groundwater level so it won't seep into the reactors. But these men lost their faith in TEPCO a long time ago. They always say it's all right, it's safe, says Suzuki. But if anything happens and it comes on the news, it always turns out they're not telling the truth. So if you ask if I believe them, I don't. And although these fish have trace radioactivity below the food safety level, they can't sell them. It'll be a long time before the market regains faith in a Fukushima-branded fish.